Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Interview Podcast. I'm Donald Grodoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com, FocusedHealthyFamily.com, and of course, InvisibleWheelchair.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair interviews, I get the wonderful chance to interview some of the experts with obsessive-compulsive disorders, professionals that treat OCD, people who are going through or have been through OCD, parents and caregivers of those suffering from OCD, and of course anyone that advocates for treatment of OCD. My goal of these interviews is to inform people on all aspects of OCD and bring about awareness of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Please remember that I am not a doctor, therapist, or counselor, and the content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these interviews are not necessarily the views and opinions of myself, Family OCD, Focused Healthy Family, and Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. You can find out more about me at FamilyOCD.com, FocusedHealthyFamily.com, and InvisibleWheelchair.com. This podcast interview was recorded February 18, 2018. Today is my first international podcast interview, and I have the greatest experience and privilege of talking to Amelia Morris. Starting at the age of 6, Amelia suffered severe OCD. Now, at 34 years old, Amelia is a successful single mom of a 6-year-old daughter and living in Australia. She was born, raised, and continues to reside in Adelaide Hills in southern Australia. She is currently in her final year of a master's in psychotherapy at the University of Adelaide and is the coordinator of the OCD and Anxiety Community Support Group, an online Facebook support group for people suffering with OCD. She tells her story and so much more in this podcast. So let's get to that interview. Well, Amelia, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to talking to you and having this conversation so people down in Australia can learn, and here in America, all over the world can learn about yourself and the support group that you are working with.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, John. It's great to be here.
Well, Amelia, the way I start these, I usually like to give you the opportunity to kind of tell your story so people can kind of get a feel of who you are and what you're about. Would you be willing to tell your story or a story about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a person with OCD. I've had pretty severe symptoms from the age of about 6 years old, so I've lived with that for a long time. It took me well into my adulthood before I was able to get an accurate diagnosis from a mental health professional and start to access some appropriate treatment. So I've had a pretty rough time with it. But in the last few years, I've been able to get some good treatment and gain a pretty good understanding of how the condition works and how to manage with it. And a big part of that has been through support groups that I've accessed online. As a result of that, I've started participating in peer support as a counsellor online. So what type of OCD did you have? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Sure. I would say that it falls largely into the primarily obsessive category. I don't have a lot of overt physical compulsions and behaviours that are outwardly obvious, but I have a lot of mental compulsions that go on. So there are cognitive processes going on repetitively inside my head. Over the years, I've had quite a few different themes as to what my actual fears and obsessions have been about. Probably the earliest one that I can remember from childhood was an obsessive fear of accidentally consuming poison or of a member of my family accidentally consuming poison. But it's changed and covered all sorts of issues throughout my lifetime.
I'm curious as what types of treatment did you, what did you find was the
the best treatment for yourself?
Well, I think probably the first treatment that I was offered was CBT, and although I wouldn't say that that was the most helpful treatment that I've received, I would certainly say that I draw on that quite a lot for coping skills. It's really been a combination of different therapies that I've found helpful. It's almost like cherry picking the best elements of different therapeutic models. CBT would be one, acceptance and commitment therapy would be another. That's been a very helpful one. I also get a huge amount of help just from talking therapy. So really just looking at the issues and discussing them with my therapist helps me a lot.
You mentioned acceptance and commitment. Is that what, I believe that's what you said. Can you tell me a little bit about that? That one, I think I've heard of it, but I'm not sure if I'm clear on what that is.
Okay, sure. Acceptance and commitment therapy is part of the third wave cognitive behavioural therapy movement that's come along in the last sort of 10 or 15 years. It does involve the same sort of examination of cognitive processes that traditional CBT uses, but it takes a slightly different stance on how to process those. So whereas cognitive behavioural therapy might encourage you to challenge and question the problematic thoughts that you're having, acceptance and commitment therapy would be more about recognizing them as thoughts that you're having and treating them as somewhat insignificant and not really worth challenging. So if you have an intrusive thought that's distressing you, rather than trying to reason with it, rationalize it away, argue with it, you might just use an acceptance type of phrase like, okay, I recognize this thought, here it is, very good. And then return your attention to whatever you're doing in the present moment rather than becoming engaged with the problematic thought patterns.
Well, thank you for that explanation. That helps me to understand. And I'm going to look more into that because that may be a topic that I want to use in my podcast to help people understand that. Because as I've gone through this, what I found kind of amazing is that a lot of OCD, people that have OCD, I should say, don't know all the different options that are out there. Because
Sure.
I know with us, have you heard of the ERP, Exposure Response Prevention?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that was one that worked really well for us. So I know but when I talk to people, a lot of them go, "Oh, what is the ERP?" So I want to get this out because I think it's important too. So your work in the support group, how did you get involved in that? What was that about?
Well, shortly after I was diagnosed with OCD, I went online looking for peer support groups. I joined a few on Facebook, a few different ones. One day, out of the blue, I was contacted by somebody who had just started their own group, and he said, why don't you come along and join my group? We've got some good people, it's going to be fun, that kind of thing. So I joined the group. At that time, it was around about 120 people, and I found it to be such a really good, helpful, supportive environment, a really close-knit group with some absolutely fantastic people. And the founder of that group became something of a mentor to me. After being in the group for a few months, I was asked to be an admin, so take on a role of sort of moderating the discussions, providing support, responding to people in distress, that sort of thing. And I continued to do that as part of a team for a number of months. We then started to have some problems with team dynamics. So the team was shrinking, and eventually the founding member, my very good friend, decided that he wasn't going to participate anymore, and after that it was just me. So I've been administrating the support group as a solo operator for about 12 months now, and I'm still finding it extremely helpful from a personal point of view, but also just an extremely rewarding opportunity to communicate with other people who've had similar experiences and to offer support. Moderate their communication with one another and watch them supporting each other is fantastic.
Going along that same line, there's another gentleman here in North Carolina where I live that have started a group, and I've joined in with them too. We've had a hard time getting it really to gel and to get people to come. Do you find, do you get a lot of people that are there that are part of it all the time? Would you say that it's successful in what it does?
Well, firstly, I would certainly say that I've experienced what you're talking about in terms of difficulty getting things to gel. It can be difficult to get people to really participate actively. So what we see a lot in the OCD and anxiety community is people who are there to observe, absorb information. You know, they're certainly getting some benefit from it, but they're, you know, not necessarily confident enough to jump in and post or comment. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of silent members, but that's fine with me. If they're getting some benefit from it, that's fine. But it can be difficult to find people who've got the confidence to speak out about these issues and to really communicate. But I would say that over time, the main sort of participatory group does change. So it will be, you know, one bunch of people will be really, really active for a little while, and then that will trail off, and another group of people will step forward. So it sort of ebbs and flows a bit, but we certainly have members who've been solid contributors for the whole, you know, 2 years that I've been there. So yeah, I've got long-term friends and new friends coming in all the time.
So what I'm really curious about too is that, you know, this is the first time I've talked with somebody, what I'd say internationally, being that you're in Australia. Does Australia handle mental health differently than we do here in the United States? Because here in the United States, I find that we're not, you know, really coping or handling mental health very well yet as a government, as a society. You know, we're still not focusing on it and really putting our health care and our attention towards it. Is it different in Australia?
That's a really interesting question. The group that I'm in at the moment, that I'm running at the moment, I'm actually one of only a very small number of Australian people in the group. It is mostly people in the UK and people in the US. So I have a really, really good opportunity to sort of speak with them about the kind of mental health care that's available in their countries and compare it, you know, with what's going on here. And I would certainly say that Australia, I think, you know, we probably have it a little bit easier than you guys in the US. Our government has poured a little bit more funding into it. The public health system is a bit more supportive of mental health issues, but we certainly have some of the same problems. It's not accessible to everybody. It's not affordable for everybody. And also the response tends to be a blanket one of, okay, you know, you have anxiety, you have depression. Here's a 10-week course of CBT and off you go. So there's not a lot of flexibility in the kind of treatments that are funded by the government programs. By and large, I would say that we're ahead of you.
I think that right now, as times are, I think that's easy to say, unfortunately, you know. But going back a little bit here, what would you say how OCD hasn't really impacted your life? Where would you say it has really impacted the most?
I would think during adolescence, it had a huge impact on the course of my life. I hadn't yet been correctly diagnosed. I was misdiagnosed a couple of times, firstly with bipolar disorder and secondly with generalized anxiety disorder, social phobia. So at that time I was kind of being tossed around between different types of therapy, different therapists. I actually stopped attending school at the age of 12 because my anxiety, my OCD symptoms were so severe that I just couldn't face it. So that was a pretty big impact on my life. I actually never returned to school after the age of 12. And I think that had I received an accurate diagnosis at that time and some more appropriate treatment, then maybe I would have got back into schooling. But at that stage, it just really wasn't recognised. I think people with more outwardly obvious compulsive behaviour probably, you know, have better luck with getting an accurate diagnosis in adolescence. The puero type of stuff does tend to go unnoticed, unfortunately.
Let's say when in your support group, I'm sure you're giving people some thoughts of things that would help them. What do you tell somebody first coming into the support group? What do you say to them to give them support and to help them, you know, move forward with their OCD?
Well, usually when people first join, they will stay silent for quite a while, and they won't post or speak up until they're having a particularly distressing episode. So quite often my first communication with new members is responding to them when they're in distress. And that can be challenging, but it's often, I think, very useful for them to talk to somebody who's experienced some of the same things that they have. So I will quite often share my own experiences with OCD as a way of making them feel more relaxed, more comfortable, more able to share. So it's about, that the peer support model being kind of highly suitable for people in that situation, because you're communicating as equals and sharing common problems. So it's a way of providing them with some reassurance and comfort quite quickly. And it also brings you into this interesting space where you're talking about quite deep issues with somebody that you've only just opened up a conversation with for the first time and that you've actually never met in person. So it's quite an interesting thing, but because it's usually based on somebody speaking out in distress, I don't really have a set thing that I say, because I'll be responding to that individual concern that they're having.
Is there any, in that distressed point, is there anything in particular that you seem to do with each person, like a common thing that you do? I know you talk about it being based on a particular issue or a thing that they're going through right then, but have you found there's certain things you do with them, with each person, that commonly, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. With almost any issue that comes up in the group, the common theme will be the intrusive thoughts, whatever it is that they're particularly concerned about. The primary issue that they're generally having is that they have distressing thoughts coming into their head, and that they're worrying, ruminating, maybe needing to perform rituals and compulsions to soothe their anxiety. So one thing that I must, I probably said it a million times to thousands of different people, intrusive thoughts are just thoughts. They're not reality. They're not something that you need to treat as hugely significant. They're distressing, but you can accept them. You can let them be there and let them do their thing and bring your attention back to the present moment. And that seems to help in most cases.
So you use that acceptance therapy quite a bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. There are certainly times when elements of more of an ERP kind of model come in. If people are having trouble letting go of compulsions, if there's a particular scenario or activity that they're avoiding because it triggers their anxiety, that's when I might start to sort of encourage more of an exposure angle, face your fears and they'll back down kind of thing. So there's a combination of modalities that I bring into play, but it just depends on the issue.
Well, Amelia, it has been a joy to talk with you. And what I'd like to do here at the last is just, if you want to let people know, I will put it up also. It will be on the website for all the audience to know that the name of the support group and how to get to it, whatever Amelia here sets up. But I'd like, if you could, to tell people how to find your support group, or the best way to get information about you and your support group.
Okay, sure. It is a Facebook support group, and the name of the group is the OCD and Anxiety Community. So if you search in Facebook, it should come up. And if you're interested in joining, then just send a request through and I'll sign you up. It's a really great bunch of supportive people, a really nice environment, no pressure, lots of communication, lots of information, and we're all there for each other, so everybody's welcome.
And just a quick question around that: do you help initiate actual meetups throughout the world, or in Australia, or any of that through the group?
We had one once in the UK back in the very early days, but since then the size of the group and the distribution of members across the globe has kind of just rendered that a little bit too tricky. I'm pretty much on my own down here in Australia. I'd love to meet with these people, but most of them are elsewhere in the world.
Okay. Well, again, Mia, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that our time difference, and it's kind of late there for you, but I very much appreciate you being on here and sharing your story. And I think the things you've talked about can help people just to understand and possibly move forward with their lives. So again, I thank you so much for being part of this.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, Don. Thank you very, very much for having me and letting me share my story.
That concludes this interview podcast. Please leave me a comment or question below. That gives me good direction where to go on future podcasts and interviews. I would love to hear your invisible wheelchair stories if you are willing to share it. if you would go to invisiblewheelchair.com and click on Tell Your Story. I want to remind you that OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, is treatable. I can help you get past OCD. So, if you have heard this interview podcast and other podcasts, and you feel like you need further assistance and would like to spend some time with me working through any issues you have, then feel free to book a session at FocusedHealthyFamily.com or FamilyOCD.com, or call me at 704-562-1630. I also offer $85 off of your initial discovery session if you mention that you heard it on this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview podcast and will join me for the next one. Remember, keep tapping, talking, and transcending your life to new heights. Thank you, and have a great day.